Hey there, thank you for being here with me today. If you're listening to this, chances are you've been through something heavy or maybe you're carrying it right now. Either way, I want you to know, you're not alone. This is a story about pain, about learning to live with what can't be fixed, and about the quiet strength we find when we stop pretending we're okay. So take a deep breath, make yourself comfortable. This is I Learned to Be Okay with Not Being Okay, My Mental Health Journey. The fluorescent lights of the doctor's office hummed, a sterile soundtrack to the crumbling edifice of my expectations. Dr. Anya Sharma, her kind eyes magnified behind her wire-rimmed glasses, delivered the verdict with a gentle but unwavering voice. It's chronic, Elara. There's no cure. We can manage the symptoms, improve your quality of life, but it won't go away. My world tilted. Chronic pain had always been a boogeyman lurking in the periphery, a hypothetical whispered in hushed tones during medical appointments. Now it was a tenant in my body, a squatter refusing eviction. I was 26, a writer with aspirations of traveling the world, of dancing until dawn, of living a life unburdened by limitations. The diagnosis of fibromyalgia, layered upon the existing anxiety disorder I'd been battling since adolescence, felt like a life sentence. I remember the drive home that day, the vibrant autumn colors of the trees mocking my inner landscape. Each crimson and gold leaf seemed to taunt me with its ephemeral beauty, a reminder of the joy I felt was slipping through my fingers. I pulled into the driveway of the small cottage I rented on the outskirts of town, the familiar comfort of its quaint facade doing little to soothe the turmoil within. The first few months were a blur of denial and desperate searching. I devoured medical journals, consulted specialists, and experimented with every alternative therapy I could find, from acupuncture to aromatherapy. I became obsessed with finding the magic bullet, the cure that would erase the diagnosis and restore me to my former self. I pushed myself relentlessly, ignoring the throbbing pain in my joints, the crushing fatigue that threatened to swallow me whole. I was determined to prove that I was not defined by my illness. My friends and family, bless their hearts, offered well-meaning but often unhelpful advice. Think positive, they'd chirp. You just need to try harder. Have you tried yoga? Each suggestion felt like a judgment, a subtle accusation that I wasn't doing enough to heal myself. I withdrew, isolating myself in my cottage, the four walls becoming both my sanctuary and my prison. One particularly bleak afternoon, I sat hunched over my laptop, tears blurring the screen as I struggled to string together a coherent sentence. The pain was a relentless tide, pulling me under. The fatigue was a lead weight, dragging me down. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair. In a moment of raw honesty, I typed a single sentence into the search bar. I'm not okay. The results that flooded the screen were a revelation. Articles, blogs, forums, all filled with stories of people who understood. People who were also struggling, people who were also in pain, people who were also not okay. It was the first time I felt seen, truly seen, since the diagnosis. I spent hours scrolling through the pages, reading stories of chronic illness warriors, their battles, their triumphs, their setbacks. I learned about pacing, about self-compassion, about the importance of setting boundaries. I discovered a community of people who weren't afraid to admit they were struggling, who offered support and encouragement without judgment. One blog, written by a woman named Sarah who had been living with fibromyalgia for over a decade, resonated deeply. She wrote about the concept of radical acceptance, of learning to accept the reality of her illness without resistance. It wasn't about giving up or resigning herself to a life of suffering, but about acknowledging the truth of her experience and choosing to live as fully as possible within its limitations. Radical acceptance. The words echoed in my mind, a seed of hope planted in the barren landscape of my despair. It wasn't a cure, but it was a starting point. I began to experiment with Sarah's suggestions. I started pacing my activities, breaking down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. I learned to say no to commitments that would drain my energy. I started practicing self-compassion, treating myself with the same kindness and understanding I would offer a friend in pain. It wasn't easy. There were days when the pain was unbearable, when the fatigue was overwhelming, when the darkness threatened to consume me. But I kept practicing, kept reminding myself that it was okay to not be okay. I also decided to seek professional help. I found a therapist who specialized in chronic pain management. Dr. Emily Carter was a beacon of light in the darkness. She helped me to develop coping mechanisms, to manage my anxiety, to process the grief and anger that I had been suppressing. Therapy was hard work. It required me to confront my deepest fears, my most painful memories. But it was also incredibly liberating. I learned to identify my triggers, to challenge my negative thought patterns, to cultivate a sense of inner resilience. One of the most valuable things I learned in therapy was the importance of self-care. I had always viewed self-care as a luxury, something to indulge in when I had time. Dr. Carter helped me to see it as a necessity, an essential part of managing my chronic illness. I started incorporating simple self-care practices into my daily routine. I took warm baths with Epsom salts. I listened to calming music. I spent time in nature. I read books that nourished my soul. I practiced mindfulness meditation, focusing on the present moment without judgment. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. Not in the way I had initially hoped, not with a miraculous cure, but with a deeper, more profound healing. I learned to accept my limitations, to embrace my imperfections, to find joy in the small moments. I started writing again, not with the same frantic ambition as before, but with a newfound sense of purpose. I wrote about my experiences with chronic illness, about the challenges, the triumphs, the lessons I had learned. My writing became a way to connect with others, to offer hope and encouragement to those who were also struggling. I even started traveling again, albeit in a different way. I planned shorter trips, pacing myself carefully, allowing for plenty of rest. I discovered the beauty of slow travel, of immersing myself in a place rather than rushing through it. One sunny afternoon, I found myself sitting on a park bench, watching children play. The pain in my joints was a dull ache, a constant reminder of my limitations. But I didn't feel defeated. I felt peaceful. I had learned to be okay with not being okay. It wasn't a destination, but a journey. A journey of self-discovery, of self-acceptance, of self-love. A journey that had led me to a place of unexpected strength and resilience. Learning to be okay with not being okay doesn't mean giving up on hope for improvement or remission. It means releasing the crushing pressure to be normal or perfect and embracing the reality of your present experience. It's about shifting your focus from what you can do to what you can do, and finding joy and meaning in the midst of your challenges. It also means acknowledging that your experience is valid and deserving of compassion. You are not alone in your struggles. There are millions of people around the world who are also living with chronic illness, chronic pain, mental health challenges, and other invisible disabilities. Connecting with others who understand can be incredibly validating and empowering. Furthermore, learning to be okay with not being okay allows you to advocate for yourself more effectively. When you accept your limitations, you can communicate your needs more clearly and confidently to healthcare providers, employers, family members, and friends. This can lead to better support and accommodations, which can significantly improve your quality of life. Moreover, embracing your imperfections can foster deeper self-compassion. Instead of beating yourself up for not being able to do everything you used to, you can offer yourself the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend in a similar situation. This can help to reduce stress, improve your mood, and promote overall well-being. I decided to become an advocate, sharing my story and connecting with others. I created a blog, The Resilient Writer, where I wrote about my experiences and offered tips and resources for living well with chronic illness. I joined online support groups, offering encouragement and support to others. I even started speaking at conferences and workshops, sharing my message of hope and resilience. Through my advocacy work, I discovered a new sense of purpose. I realized that my struggles had given me a unique perspective, a deep understanding of the challenges faced by people living with chronic illness. I could use my voice to raise awareness, to challenge stigmas, and to advocate for better access to care. One of my proudest achievements was working with a local hospital to develop a chronic pain management program. The program offered a range of services, including physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, and support groups. It was designed to help people with chronic pain manage their symptoms, improve their quality of life, and live as fully as possible. During the development of the program, I learned about the importance of interdisciplinary care. I worked closely with doctors, nurses, therapists, and other healthcare professionals to create a comprehensive and holistic approach to chronic pain management. I realized that no single treatment is effective for everyone and that a personalized approach is essential. I also learned about the power of patient empowerment. When people are actively involved in their own care, they are more likely to adhere to treatment plans, manage their symptoms effectively, and achieve their goals. I made sure that the chronic pain management program included components that promoted patient education, self-management skills, and shared decision-making. As I continued to heal and grow, I realized that my journey had transformed me in profound ways. I had become more compassionate, more resilient, and more appreciative of the small things in life. I had learned to live in the present moment, to embrace uncertainty, and to find joy in the midst of adversity. I had also learned the importance of self-advocacy. I realized that I had a responsibility to speak up for myself and for others who were struggling. I became a passionate advocate for people living with chronic illness, working to raise awareness, challenge stigmas, and promote access to care. One of my most memorable experiences as an advocate was testifying before a state legislative committee about the need for better access to mental health services. I shared my own story of struggling with anxiety and depression, and I spoke about the importance of early intervention and affordable treatment. My testimony helped to persuade the committee to pass a bill that expanded access to mental health services for low-income residents. I continued to write, to speak, and to advocate, sharing my message of hope and resilience with anyone who would listen. I became known as the resilient writer, a symbol of hope for people living with chronic illness. My journey wasn't over. I still had bad days, days when the pain was unbearable, days when the fatigue was overwhelming. But I had learned to cope, to manage, to find moments of joy even in the midst of suffering. And I had learned to be okay with not being okay. The cottage, once a symbol of my isolation, became my sanctuary. I filled it with light, with laughter, with love. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and family, people who understood and accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace, sipping a cup of herbal tea, I realized that I had found my purpose. I was no longer defined by my illness, but by my resilience, my compassion, my ability to inspire hope in others. I was okay with not being okay, and that was okay. Years passed. I continued to write, to speak, and to advocate. I became a grandmother, and I cherished every moment I spent with my grandchildren. I taught them about resilience, about compassion, about the importance of self-care. One day, as I was sitting on the park bench, watching my grandchildren play, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had lived a full and meaningful life, despite my chronic illness. I had learned to be okay with not being okay, and that had made all the difference. My journey had been long and arduous, but it had also been filled with beauty, with love, with purpose. I had learned to embrace my imperfections, to find joy in the small moments, and to live each day to the fullest. And as I sat there, watching my grandchildren play, I knew that I had finally found peace. I was okay with not being okay, and that was more than enough. As time marched on, my understanding of health evolved. It wasn't simply the absence of disease, but a dynamic state of well-being encompassing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. I recognize the interconnectedness of these aspects and the importance of nurturing each of them. I deepened my meditation practice, exploring different techniques to quiet my mind and connect with my inner self. I discovered the power of mindfulness, learning to observe my thoughts and feelings without judgment. I found solace in nature, spending time in forests, by the ocean, and under the open sky. I also became more conscious of my diet, nourishing my body with whole unprocessed foods. I learned about the importance of gut health and the role it plays in overall well-being. I experimented with different recipes and discovered a love for cooking healthy and delicious meals. I continued to exercise regularly, adapting my workouts to my changing needs. I found that gentle movement, such as walking, yoga, and swimming, was particularly beneficial for managing my pain and fatigue. I listened to my body and rested when I needed to, avoiding overexertion. I also prioritized my relationships, nurturing the connections with my loved ones. I made time for meaningful conversations, shared experiences, and acts of kindness. I realized that social support is essential for emotional well-being and that strong relationships can buffer against stress and adversity. I learned to set healthy boundaries, saying no to requests that would drain my energy or compromise my values. I realized that it's okay to prioritize my own needs and that self-care is not selfish, but essential for maintaining my well-being. I also became more aware of my limiting beliefs and negative thought patterns. I challenged these beliefs and replaced them with more positive and empowering thoughts. I learned to focus on my strengths and accomplishments, rather than dwelling on my weaknesses and failures. I discovered the power of gratitude, taking time each day to appreciate the good things in my life. I kept a gratitude journal, writing down things I was thankful for, both big and small. I found that focusing on gratitude helped to shift my perspective and cultivate a sense of joy and contentment. I also became more involved in my community, volunteering my time to causes I cared about. I realized that giving back to others can be incredibly rewarding and that it helps to create a sense of purpose and meaning in life. I continue to learn and grow, attending workshops, reading books, and listening to podcasts on topics related to health and well-being. I became a lifelong learner, always seeking new knowledge and insights. As I aged, I embraced the wisdom that comes with experience. I learned to accept the changes in my body and mind, recognizing that aging is a natural part of life. I focused on maintaining my physical and mental fitness, staying active and engaged in the world around me. I also learned to let go of things I couldn't control. I realized that worry and anxiety are often unproductive, and that it's better to focus on what I can do to make a positive difference. I practiced acceptance and surrender, trusting that everything would unfold as it should. In my final years, I reflected on my life with gratitude and contentment. I had faced many challenges, but I had also experienced much joy and love. I had learned to be okay with not being okay, and that had made all the difference. My health journey taught me resilience, compassion, and the importance of living each day to the fullest. My legacy wasn't about curing the incurable. It was about living a vibrant, meaningful life in spite of it, and inspiring others to do the same. Thank you truly for listening to my story. If anything in it resonated with you, if you've ever felt lost, overwhelmed, or just tired of pretending to be fine, I hope you now know you're not alone. Healing doesn't always look like a straight line. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's messy. But every step, every tear, every moment of grace, it all matters. So if you're in the middle of your own storm, I invite you to pause, breathe, and remind yourself, it's okay to not be okay. And if this story brought you comfort, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it too. Subscribe for more stories that heal and leave a comment. I'd love to know where you are in your journey. Until next time. Take gentle care of yourself. You are enough, exactly as you are.